Welcome to another episode of The Damage Report with me, John Adarola, and we're very lucky to be joined on this Tuesday, an election Tuesday, by the way, and we'll be giving you more details on that by contributor Rebel HQ, as well as host in her own right, Yasmin Kahn. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, always happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. That's the thing that's working out right now. What's not working out is that I forgot to take my dog's collars off before starting the show, so I could already hear my dog Hilo scratching during one of the social breaks. I'm gonna have to rectify that. But anyway, very glad to have you here. It's a pretty eventful week with the hearings and everything, so it's great to have you here. Want to tell us a little bit about what you've been working on recently?
Yeah, so obviously with Rebel HQ, we've been talking a lot about what's been coming out with the hearings. So I'm sure that we'll touch on that today, John, but there's definitely more in-depth coverage over on Rebel HQ.
Sounds good, like to hear it. Well, we are going to be talking a little bit about January 6th in just a little bit, but in addition to that, we've got a ton that we need to dive into. The unexpected, at least for me, debate on Fox News between Bernie Sanders and Lindsey Graham, that got a little bit spicy. We're gonna talk a little bit more about Uvalde and what the cops are doing to make our impression of them coming out of this terrible shooting even a little bit more negative. Okay, so I need you to do me a favor. Tell the audience a little bit about the last video you did on Rebel HQ for a minute, okay?
What was the last video that I did on Rebel HQ?
Because I'm gonna do this. So if you could go to a shot of her, that'd be great. Thank you. I'm gonna take care of this while she talks about that. Okay, thank you.
I don't even remember
what's the last thing you worked on? Well, what coverage have you done of January 6th on Rebel HQ recently?
Well, just now I wrote a whole script about what came out with. You're putting me on the spot, John. I don't even remember what my script.
I apologize. Okay. Well, you know what? We're gonna check in. Everybody can find out by heading over to Rebel HQ on YouTube.
I know you try to like pass it over to me.
No, what I like is that we've discovered that we have a severance type situation going on where once the work on a particular channel is done, that part of the brain.
I know what we talked about. Yeah. So like the most recent one that I just worked on was about Donald Trump and whether or not he's delusional and whether or not he believed his own lies. And it doesn't matter whether or not he believed his own lies for him to be incriminated in contributing to the insurrection at the Capitol and just lying to the American public and saying that he won the election even though he was told repeatedly that he did not win the election.
I like it. And nice recovery, Yasmin. I do like that. Okay, so we're all situated. We got our news, we got our dogs, which have now been silenced, and I think we're ready to go. Are you ready to do this thing?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, I thought you were talking about dogs. Sorry.
No. Hopefully they'll stay quiet from now on. Anyway, with that said, we are going to launch into a little bit of discussion about January 6th, including one of the things that they chose to focus on yesterday in what they revealed. So let's jump into this.
Campaign knew these claims of voter fraud were false, yet they continued to barrage small dollar donors with emails, encouraging them to donate to something called the Official Election Defense Fund. The Select Committee discovered no such fund existed.
I don't believe there is actually a fund called the Election Defense Fund.
Is it fair to say the Election Defense Fund was another, I think we've called it a marketing tactic?
Yes.
And tell us about these funds as marketing tactics.
Just the topic matter.
Just topic matter, Now look, it's up to you to what extent you think the revelations about exactly how much the Trump campaign conned their own followers following the election of 2020, how important that is in comparison to the goal of all of that, which was not just to enrich themselves, but to contradict the will of the voters and remain as president when that's not what the American people wanted. These are two very significant things. I would argue the end of democracy is more important, but the wholesale scam that was run following the election was put on full display in the most recent hearings of the January 6th committee. They revealed that this supposed fund that they were raising money for to contest the election results raised $250 million. That was not what they raised for the election in advance. That would be a huge amount of money. No, that's what they raised after the election, supposedly to make sure that the fraud was revealed, but that was never the intention, and that's not what they did with the money. They put the money into this Save America PAC. They made contributions to Mark Meadows' charity. That has something to do, I guess, with election fraud, to a conservative organization employing former Trump staffers, to the Trump Hotel Collection, and to the company that organized the rally that preceded the attack on the Capitol. And in that video, you saw Amanda Wick, who's a lawyer who's working with the January 6th committee. She said the emails, because they focus on these massive text and email blasts that were going out every single day to Trump followers, said they continued through January 6th, even as Trump gave his speech that morning. 30 minutes after the last fundraising email was sent, the Capitol was breached. So they had spent at that point like close to 10 weeks fundraising $250 million with no intention that it would go towards what they said. It was just topic matter. It was a marketing tactic to get money out of their credulous followers. What do you think, Yasmin?
Yeah, things like this, whenever they're revealed in something like the January 6th hearing, like what we're all seeing now, we're all watching that as a nation. We all know, all of us here watching this show right now, we all know that Donald Trump is a grifter, and we know that he's a liar, and we know that he'll say whatever he needs to say to reach whatever end he's trying to get to. But the thing what it comes down to is trust, right, amongst his own base. Why do these people still trust him? Why do they still give him money after we all know that he's a liar and a grifter? Even if they're slow to come to that conclusion, now the evidence is there before them, so they can't really deny it. This is money that he was asking for, donations to support something that he knew was a lie. We have it on video that he was told repeatedly that none of this stuff was true. None of the stuff he was saying was true. All the things that he was telling his base that the money was going to go towards investigating, there was nothing to investigate, right? We all know that now. It's their money that he took, and it would be interesting to see if any of that makes a dent in how they feel about him, whether or not they decide to continue trusting him in the future. Now that there's this indisputable evidence, really, frankly, I mean, it's on video. You can't argue with it.
If I could bet, I'd bet it's not gonna get through to them. Look, get you a following that loves being conned the way they love being, man, these people love being ripped off by Donald Trump. I mean, it's rare enough that the individual people who were worst ripped off even have an issue. So I saw people in the chat who were mentioning one of the things that they did to raise money, that we did a lot of coverage on this at the time is, and by the way, Trump was not the only person who did this, he was maybe the worst, was setting people up fairly dishonestly for automatic payments to his PAC or whatever. And not small amounts of money. Sure, many of these donations were small, as we'll get to, but some people were having $600, $1,000, $2,000 being automatically deducted from their accounts, and they had no idea why. The Trump campaign ended up having to give back millions of dollars because of this. And if you're a conservative, you're watching this, I know that politics to you is just wanting the libs to get owned. You have no hope or faith that your lot in life will ever improve because you understand on some base level that politicians don't care about you and they're not gonna do anything, including the politicians that you support. And so the only thing that you can hope for is that people you don't like will do poorly, that they will be made to feel pain. Those are not the people who are being conned though, you idiots. You're the ones who are being robbed here. He raised $250 million. You'll notice he's not president. So where did the $250 million go? Well, you know where it went to. It went to paying off his friends and his lackeys, and mostly him. He's saving this money so he can feel influential and big and maybe put it towards a future run. And maybe to you that's enough, but it definitely didn't go to what they said it was going to. And Zoe Lofgren, who's a member of the January 6th committee, who was really helping to articulate this argument about the big con side of the big lie, said in an interview, well, people were conned by the former president. They were conned into believing that the election had been stolen and that they should go to the Capitol as the president asked them to. I think the average donation from those emails, false email requests, was something like $17. These were people that weren't rich people. They were conned by the president, whose big lie was also a big ripoff. And look, certainly many of the people who went to January 6th, I mean, there's people who took private jets. And look, if you can take off that much time to fly across the country, you're not, the worst off in the world. But there were a lot of people that gave the little amount of money that they had, people who were actually struggling, and Donald Trump doesn't care. He's a multi-billionaire. If it cost $250 million to fight election fraud, which it doesn't, he could pay for it himself. He could do all this. He never needs to raise money off these people because he's so wealthy. But the fact that he cons them, the fact that he so rarely is willing to put his own money where his ambitions are, I don't get it, Yasmin. I don't get why that doesn't bother them more.
I mean, there's a whole subset of YouTube that I sometimes get stuck in, and it's people who expose other grifters on the internet. And most of these people are like online people, Instagram models or whatever they're promoting. And people just give them all their money, and they'll do a lot of these same tactics. Like they'll kind of create a problem and then offer a solution that people then need to pay to access. And then they'll do the thing with the recurring payments, so people don't even realize how much of their money they're giving to these people and to these causes. And Donald Trump is doing all of these same things to these people. And unfortunately, hopefully now they're a little bit more informed, but back then, I mean, people are really easy to get conned into these things because they don't really understand the systems that are being used against them. Hopefully now with the hearing that will be remedied a little bit, but like you said, I mean, who knows if it'll actually make a difference with these people.
Yeah. Who knows? And look, I acknowledge some of you might be aware there's a particular kink of being financially dominated. Some people are into that. They like someone who just takes all of their money. But at least that's generally an open thing. They understand what they're getting into. Don't fall into that trap politically. By the way, it's not just Trump. Like the Democrats, we criticize them all the time for seeming to think that every crisis, every major issue in America is just there to do email blasts about. Don't do anything. Don't lower the chance that the same sort of crisis happens again. Just raise money off of it. Like, sure, your reproductive rights are about to be stripped away, but I think this is an opportunity to raise some money. They do that too. At least in theory, if they could vote in a way, they would. Maybe Trump, no intention whatsoever.
That the committee has found information that Kimberly Guilfoyle was paid $60,000 to speak at the rally on January 6th. $60,000 for a speech that was 3 minutes?
If that.
If that, 3 minutes long. And what have you heard over the last several hours since that revelation about how people in Trump world feel about that?
So I want to say two things about that. People in Trump world are sharing that clip. They are aghast that this is the amount of money that she got for a speech to introduce her boyfriend. They couldn't really get over. I had one former advisor say to me, essentially, these were folks who were raising money in small amounts from retirees, telling them this was going to some legal fight that didn't really happen, and instead Kimberly Guilfoyle is getting paid. But this is the whole ecosystem. So it's fine that some people are upset about this, but there's some level of this that often goes on around Trump, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
Yeah, there's just huge amounts of grift, obviously. Almost all of politics is grift. In a year or two, that'll be literally the entire thing. We won't even have elected office anymore. And $60,000 in comparison to the $250 million that Trump stole from his fans for his non-existent attempt to challenge the results of the election. That's not a lot of money, but I don't know, sometimes it takes something like this to really get through to people. Like $250 million is almost impossibly large to conceive of. It's almost too big. But $60,000 for a 2-minute introduction of her boyfriend that I would argue she would probably have done for free. I mean, it's her boyfriend who's speaking there. She's gonna be there anyway. She probably could have done it pro bono. I mean, this is just, they stole the money and then they hand it out to the people that they like. That's it. How many $17 small dollar donations from poor conservatives does it take to add up to $60,000 for 2 minutes worth of work? Less than one commercial break worth of work for Kimberly Guilfoyle. And I will give her this. We know from the RNC speech that she puts her all into these things. She'll go crazy during these speeches, but I don't think it's worth more than $50,000. Yasmin, what do you think?
Oh man, I'm not an envious person, but I really wish somebody would pay me $60,000 to speak for 2 minutes. I really want to hate the hustle though. But it's, I mean, it was egregious whenever we found out that Omarosa was in the White House doing who knows what and getting paid 6 figures to do it. But even then, that was over the course of a year, if not more, that she was paid for that. Whatever her service was while she was there. This is 2 minutes, and that's an entire year's salary for a lot of Americans. And It really is, the smaller numbers do help to put things into perspective in a way that $250 million is really just a hard number to wrap your head around, right? And it's like what you were saying, how many of those individual donations needed to be donated in order to get to this egregious amount of money that we can just give it to somebody who's not even anybody, she's just somebody's girlfriend, and I don't know. It blows my mind, and I'm jealous and I hate it.
Yeah, I just like this is how it works. This is what so much of it is. There's window dressing of policy sometimes, but these people, they just can't help but be wealthy. It all lines up to poor people who desperately need help. Both people that we might agree with on a lot of different things, and some people that we might not, desperately need help. And just the money flows to the worst people, literally the worst people. Thank you to everyone in the audience who worked it out too. It takes 3,529 $17 donations. That is, imagine the crowd of conservatives who just handed the money to Kimberly Guilfoyle, a person who's already wealthy. She was a host on Fox News. She was married to Gavin Newsom and everything. She's got money. She didn't need the money for that. I don't know. It's not going to matter. I think that these people are like, they're not, vaccinated against COVID, but they're inoculated against reason or understanding how they're being conned. But this sort of thing should get to them. I don't understand it. Anyway, there's not a lot else that I really want to focus on January 6th just yet. I feel like our network has done a lot of coverage of that. I do want to let you know, by the way, that apparently Wednesday's hearing has been postponed while they get PowerPoints ready or something. I don't know why they're not ready. They've been doing this for like a year, but that has been postponed. But there was one weird little video that I saw, and I felt like it was an opportunity to maybe jump in and help out a person that I've not often considered a friend or an ally. This is more of an enemy, so I'm gonna do my part, but let's start off with this video.
Third day on the job, the Capitol gets breached, and then they blame me and President Trump and many other Republican members of Congress for doing it. I was so shocked, and I'll tell you what was so shocking is I thought what you just said. I thought the Capitol was the most secure building in our country, at least.
Right, with thousands of cameras.
Well, there are lots of cameras, but you can't see the video footage. I don't know why you.
Oh, that's interesting. So Marjorie Greene hasn't had an issue with January 6th since it happened. She hasn't seemed to be bothered by the violence, about the attempted murder of cops and all that, about the attempt to overthrow democracy, to kill Nancy Pelosi, to hang Mike Pence. And I didn't realize the whole time she doesn't think that there's footage from it. But there is, Marjorie Greene. Like, she just missed it. Maybe there's a chance to win her over to her cause. Let's play a little representative sample of the video that is actually abundantly available. I know, Marjorie Greene, that's pretty shocking stuff, isn't it? Well, it turns out there's actually hours and hours of that, very similar in many cases to that. If it's not clear from the video, because of course it is admittedly chaotic, those are cops in riot equipment trying to stop our elected representatives from being assassinated by your political friends and allies. And those are conservatives trying to kill them with hockey sticks and flagpoles and stuff like that. That's actually been available since the 6th in many cases, Marjorie Greene. So I would consider looking into it. I mean, we're already having the hearings. I feel like you should probably be prepped for them. What do you think, Yasmin?
I mean, she doesn't need the footage. She was there that day, wasn't she? She was in the buildings. She knows what was going on. I mean, she was doing her planning meetings beforehand. She knew what was going to happen. We already know that. And the footage, when she made the comment, I was like, I've seen the footage. So how did you miss that? But the other thing is she talks about how secure the building is supposed to be. And yeah, they have cops on site at the building, but a handful of cops can't do anything against a mob of angry people, right? Any kind of police force can't do a whole lot against that many people, especially unexpectedly. And then whenever the president was supposed to call for help and to get more people to help contain the mob, he refused to do so. So that's why things devolved the way that they did. And that's it.
Yeah, look, the argument that I honestly, I try to, for a limited period of time, I try to put myself into the headspace of a crazy person like this. It's kind of like 11 entering into the upside down. It's dangerous and don't stay there too long, but maybe it's necessary. I don't know what point she's trying to make that there's no footage. Like, is this some sort of like Truth Social or 4chan conspiracy theory about like, there was something that happened on a camera that we can't see that shows that secretly was in Like, I honestly don't even know what point she's trying to make. My gut guess is that she's not trying to make any point. She's just literally one of the stupidest people in this country, and she has no idea what she's saying. There is a lot of footage. You may not see it on Fox News, but it is available. Look it up. It's pretty gripping stuff.
The thing is, they're not going to look it up, and she knows that, right? She knows if she can say something on a podcast and she can make all these claims, and no one will look it up, because look at what happened with the big lie. They just said some things, and people just believe them. They just trusted it. They didn't ask for evidence. They didn't ask to see any proof of what they were saying. So no, she can say whatever she wants, and her base will believe her.
Yeah,
I think that's what it comes down to.
Look, I think you're 100% right. The other part that I think is so weird, and you heard it there in that clip, and it's been a constant from the very beginning, is the simultaneous, seemingly untenable positions of having no real issue with what happened, not thinking that it's a big deal, not thinking that we need to be worried about it or we need to guard against it in the future, not thinking that the white supremacy or the anti-Semitism that was there is an issue, or the fact that conservatives were trying to murder cops with their bare hands. That's not an issue. But they keep coming back and saying it is egregious that they didn't better secure the building. But against what? Against something that's not a big deal. How dare they not have called in more people? But it doesn't matter that the conservatives got in there because they're perfectly fine, they're patriots. There are conservatives that I would argue generally don't show a lot of mental flexibility or strength that hold those totally incompatible positions, that it is simultaneously egregious that Marjorie Greene wasn't better protected against something that doesn't matter. And by the way, they're doing the same thing with COVID. They will criticize Biden for the numbers when they spike, but they don't think COVID is a big deal. Like, I don't get how you can have your BS and eat it too. I don't get how it works. Yaz, I don't know. You said that you fall into these rabbit holes on YouTube. Maybe you understand this argument better than I do, but it just shreds my brain.
I mean, I try to understand them, and that's why I end up in these rabbit holes, but I don't think I come out with a whole lot more insight into these people apart from just cognitive dissonance and just needing to believe whatever it is that they need to believe to make themselves feel better at that moment. Doesn't matter if it was incompatible with the previous thought that they had, or if it's going to be incompatible with future thoughts that they're going to have. It doesn't matter. Just right now, this is how I feel, and I'm gonna say it, and I'm gonna say it like it's a fact, because they're so convicted in whatever they're talking about.
No, I think that you're probably right. And for now, we're gonna end on that. Trump put out this like 12-page statement. I was gonna read you a little bit. I'm not gonna read it. He basically he's telling all the same lies. He didn't write it, by the way. It's got footnotes. Trump has never written a footnote in his life. And in the end, he basically announces that he's running for president. So I'm fine. We're moving on from that. We're apparently not going to have hearings tomorrow, but they will be coming sooner, sooner or later, and we will be covering them then. For now, though, I want to take a break so that we can come back, because in a little bit, we're going to be talking about Bernie Sanders versus Lindsey Graham. That's on the other side of this. Okay, everybody, let's have a little bit of fun with Bernie Sanders versus Lindsey Graham, starting with this.
Quickly, can you address that, Senator?
Trump lost the election.
Can you address that, Senator? I mean, can you say definitively the election was not stolen?
Yeah, I voted to certify the election. There was some mail-in balloting chicanery out there, but no, I voted to certify the election. President Biden's the president. And whether
Did he win the election?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what about all of the candidates out there who are trying to say that he didn't? Your Republican candidates that you want people to vote for?
Well, what about the people saying defund the police? You talk to them, I'll talk to that crowd.
Right, your crowd is a lot larger than my crowd.
Okay, so to be clear, Lindsey Graham delivered that line. If you're only hearing this as, yeah, well, you talk about the defund the police. My entire political movement has been overtaken by a fundamentally anti-democratic, proto-fascist ideology, but what about the people on your side that think we should redirect a little bit of public funds to people who are better situated to deal with crises as they occur? Oh yeah, and he turns away like it was a mic drop moment against Bernie Sanders. Now, we're gonna have a lot of Bernie Sanders response, and he really sticks it to them on the big lie and everything. But Yasmin, what did you think about the attempted whataboutism from Lindsey Graham there?
First of all, I don't know why anybody listens to anything that Lindsey Graham has to say anymore, because he's so not credible anymore as a public figure. He's flip-flopped on so many different issues that, it's hard to keep track of his stance on things anymore. But then, yeah, it's an incredible false equivalency between people who want police reform, a reform to a public service right here in the United States that affects literally every American, versus the people who want to insurrect the Capitol. I don't know if insurrect is a verb, but I'm going to use it as one. But these people, it's not the same thing. It's very much not the same thing. It's what you said. It's these people who are asking for public funds to be redistributed into society instead of giving, billions and billions of dollars to police forces across America, and instead putting into programs that would actually help people, compared to people who just choose to believe a big lie that was perpetuated and started by Republican leaders, including Donald Trump, who was then president, and then pretending like that's the same thing. It's not the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing at all. Also, it didn't happen.
And it didn't happen.
We didn't do it. Like, some people had the idea and still do, and nobody in power listened to them, and so nothing happened. So how is that equivalent? It's not. Lindsey Graham knows it's not. It's supposed to stand. Like, he knows what his party is. I'm sure that 60 years ago, when he was a young senator, he probably had no idea that his party would descend to these disgusting depths. And now he's trying to find a way to stay relevant, I guess. Well, no, this is your party. They all believe that elections are only valid if they win. That's it. That's their if they have any connection or commitment to democracy, it's that it only matters if they win. That's it. That's your party. You go deal with that. But I want to give you a little bit more of what Bernie Sanders had to say on this particular issue, and then we'll get to more fun stuff from Bernie Sanders. He says, now that happens to be what we call a big lie. And yet many of the Republicans that Senator Graham are asking you to vote for are maintaining that. What does that mean? It goes beyond Trump. It goes beyond the 2020 election. It means what they are saying is the entire system. You can't trust anybody. And if you can't trust the election results, then what is the obvious alternative? We need a strong man. All right, conservatives went to, I think it's Hungary, to meet with Mr. Orban, talking about Viktor Orban, who runs an authoritarian type society. So the struggle we are facing is not just that Lindsey and I disagree on this or that issue, which we do. It is the future of American democracy and whether we move to authoritarianism based on, among other things, a very big lie. And Bernie was right. I believe this was just earlier today. The Washington Post identified more than 100 Republican primary winners who have stated they agree with the big lie on one level or another. That the indisputable fact that Biden won the election is inconvenient, and so we reject it. That is hardly the same thing as some progressives pushing what some others might think is a bad frame on reform for the police or whatever. It's BS. We don't have to dignify it. But they have identified, Bernie has identified the major issue here, which is that creeping authoritarianism. And yes, I assume that his reference to Hungary piqued your interest. I know that you care more than most about what happens in other countries. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, wasn't Tucker Carlson even broadcasting his show from Hungary for a little while, if I remember correct? Yeah, and it is really concerning. I mean, Hungary was one of those countries that was a concern, or I guess kind of still is, regarding Finland and Sweden entering NATO. They thought that Hungary would be the one to block those countries from entering because they're so in cahoots with Putin and with Russia, right? And these are also the people that the GOP is aligning themselves with. They're choosing to align themselves with these people. And in the meantime, they're trying to create, again, these false equivalencies between actual issues facing American people and blowing off accusations of authoritarianism that's trying to take over the United States, right? That's a real concern. We had an actual insurrection. We had a president who did not want to give up his democratically elected, he didn't want to give up the presidency because he lost the election, is what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, all these things are, the first time they've happened in our history and in a real way, at least since the Civil War, right? And you can't see something like what happened on January 6th at the Capitol and then shrug it off and then still be in cahoots with Viktor Orban over in Hungary.
Yeah. Well, Lindsey Graham has found a way. That's his party. He's not super influential inside of it, but that's what he wants to do. let's move to a little bit more of Bernie Sanders. So Fox is doing this debate between Bernie Sanders and Lindsey Graham. Apparently they're going to do a few of them, and the full thing will be coming out this weekend. But I want to give you a taste of how it went for Lindsey Graham. Take a look at some of Bernie's early remarks.
What you don't hear him talking about are, in fact, the most important issues facing this country. That's what the establishment does. Lindsey is a very good and effective representative of the establishment. Does Lindsey have a concern that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? That some 60,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor on time? I didn't hear much about that in that opening statement. Lindsey care that we have the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and that the pharmaceutical industry right now has 1,500 paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. to make sure that in some cases we pay 10 times more for the medicine that we need? Did Lindsey talk about the fact that we have in South Carolina and all over this country tens of millions of workers working for starvation wages? Did he talk about a corrupt political system in which billionaires today can start a super PAC? And I guess you have some familiarity with super PACs. They help fund your campaign.
Boom, roasted from Bernie Sanders there. You know that Lindsey Graham knows that he's losing a debate when they keep cutting him and he's just got that like little smile on his face. Like he doesn't have a response because he knows the position of his party. It's that they don't care about those things. If you're a conservative, I need to get through to you that they don't care about your economic lot in life and they have no intention of ever improving it. They don't even pretend to have an intention to do that. When was the last time you heard a Republican politician talk about your wages and how stagnant they are? You know that you're not paid enough. Why is it that it doesn't bother them the way that it bothers you? And why doesn't it bother you that it doesn't bother them? Why do you keep supporting politicians that don't care about you? But this isn't just about conservatives. America, you could have had that guy as your president. Did anyone else get debate vibes 2020 or 2016? That was just what Bernie Sanders says. That's what his values are. That's the focus that he's always had, is on dealing with those issues. And America chose to go in another direction. And thus we end up with the situation we're in, Yasmin.
Yeah, it's almost a little insulting to Bernie that they paired him up with Lindsey Graham, because Lindsey represents a party that doesn't have a platform, right? And it is very reminiscent of a lot of those debates that we saw, especially leading up to the 2020 election. Remember when there was like a million different Democrats running for the presidency? And I mean, Elizabeth Warren had plans on plans on plans of how she was going to get things done, and she had research and all that. It didn't matter because all that matters, all that you're fighting against on the other side is just people saying things and people believing them, right? And that's it. They don't need evidence, they don't need proof, they don't need to back up any of their claims, they don't need research, they don't need surveys, nothing. So the Democrats are doing all this work trying to make an impression on people and trying to educate people on things that they need to be educated on, things that people in positions of power should have some insight to. But on the other side, you just have Lindsey Graham sipping his water and nodding and smirking and not really having a rebuttal, because there is no rebuttal. They do not have a platform. They don't. Officially, they don't have a platform.
Yeah, behind the scenes, they do. They have economic goals. They've largely already accomplished them decades ago. They just iterate a little bit each time they get a Republican president. They just give a couple trillion more dollars in tax cuts to the wealthy. That's what they're actually doing. Now, if you're a conservative and you're watching this, you might think, well, wait, they don't say that. No, I get it. They don't say that. And you don't focus on it because your head is spinning from how enraged you are by the trans community constantly. That is the con they're playing on you. They keep you enraged so you don't see what they're doing, okay? And Lindsey Graham is a part of that just as much as Ben Shapiro is a part of that. They all share the same goal. They're a part of it. You're not. You're on the outside. You're a tool to keep them in power so they can maintain their position of political and economic dominance. That's all it is. Bernie Sanders is a threat to that, and that is why the establishment on both sides, including Democrats, were so terrified of him. I want to give you a little bit more Bernie Sanders. He makes a final point that I think is worth focusing on, so let's jump to that.
Bottom line is we are moving toward oligarchy. And if we don't stand up and say that we need a government that represents working people and the middle class, I worry very much about the future of this country, and I hope you'll speak to some of those issues.
Okay, that is the populism that is the only populism that is worth anything. You hear about other populisms that in practice are just more anti-immigrant. talk and more hatred of the LGBTQ. It doesn't actually mean anything. If populism is not a threat to those who rule, it's worthless, okay? And it's worthless by design. If you think Tucker Carlson is a different type of populist, but he also hates the elites. He's one of the elites. He goes to all the parties. He's at the dinner table with them. You're not, as people are saying, as George Carlin said, it's a big club and you're not in it. You better believe Tucker Carlson is in it, okay? Lindsey Graham is in it. Trump is in it. Bill Clinton is in it. The elites on both sides are in it. Bernie Sanders clearly is not. That is why we need someone like him. And just watching this reminds me of how close we came. And I really hope that, within a year or so, we're in the thick of a vigorous primary campaign where we can have another chance to convince people that there is an escape button on the horrible situation we've been found in. But you're not gonna get it from Pete Buttigieg. You're not gonna get it from Kamala Harris. You're not gonna get it from any of those. You need a strong progressive who understands the march, not just towards fascism, which we're on, and authoritarianism, and Christian nationalism, but also oligarchy. Those are attached phenomenon, and we have to fight against them. We need someone like a Bernie Sanders. Any final thoughts about the debate, Yas?
Yeah, I like how you said that we need someone like a Bernie Sanders, because it did come up that somebody asked Bernie if Joe Biden runs again in 2024, would Bernie Sanders support him or run against him? And he said that he would support him. It's an insane, in 2024, both of these men will be in their 80s, right? They're too old to be running the country, right? As much as we love Bernie here, as much as I love Bernie, as much as you do, he's too old. He's 80 years old, And the thing is, if we want progressive policies to be enacted, if we want progression in the country, we need younger people to take up the mantle, even if that is just in Congress. Even if, we have an 80-year-old president, if we have younger people in Congress, I think it will make a big deal, a big difference. So, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I hope so. I hope that we get to that point. Okay, we ended up talking about that longer than I expected. So we're gonna go early to our second break. When we come back though, if you thought that the cops in Uvalde couldn't disappoint you more, couldn't frustrate you more, they have been working overtime to find a way to do that, and we're gonna reveal it after this. From the very beginning of the Uvalde shooting, that tragedy was made worse by virtually everything the cops chose to do and the ways that they chose to misinform the public about what actually happened. And day after day, we would learn more and more of the stuff that they had said that was just not true. And almost always, it was designed to cover up their own failures. The fact that they did not react when they were supposed to, the likelihood that more people died as a result of it. And you might be surprised to find out that there is still more we could find out, actually. There is, in theory, body cam footage that we could take a look at, but they don't want you to. And isn't that convenient? The group that's been lying the whole time, that massively failed those kids, now doesn't want you to learn more about what they were doing and saying on that day. So they're evading requests for records that are coming in from a lot of different people. And we want to break down what they're saying, their argument as to why we shouldn't see that footage. The Texas Department of Public Safety, they asked the state's Office of the Attorney General to prevent the public release of police body camera footage from the mass shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, in part because, it argues, the footage could be used by other shooters to determine weaknesses in police responses to crimes. In the letter, attorneys revealed there have been 148 requests for information that have been made to the city from May 25th, right following the attack, to June 7th by media organizations and individuals. So don't do it, don't give in, because that may allow other shooters to determine weaknesses in police responses to crimes. And I would like to just get out in front of this and say, you don't need to worry about that, okay? You don't need to worry about them poring over the footage and figuring out their weaknesses, because they're all there everywhere. Everybody in the country knows about your weaknesses. You don't go in. That's a pretty significant weakness, that they could just go in there, begin killing people, and an hour can go by. We don't need body cam footage to know about your weaknesses. Literally everyone does. That's why you're saying this, because of your weaknesses. But they're trying to stop people from, I don't know, maybe overhearing on the body cam footage what people, including the chief in charge, was saying, Yaz. Maybe conversation between the officers. Maybe there were cops who were frustrated and wanted to go in, but were being stopped from it. I don't know, but if they get their way, we will never know. What do you think?
Yeah. And unfortunately, they might get their way, right? I mean, they're the ones who are holding on to these body camera footage. And the thing is with a lot of this is that it is just another deflection. And we're so used to we're like bouncing off deflections all the time, just trying to like get straight to the actual issue, which is gun control in America, or like what Matthew McConaughey was talking about, gun responsibility, whatever you want to call it, right? It's just another deflection, right? And also, if you have camera footage and you don't want people to see it, isn't that already just kind of an inherent admission of guilt, right? But then the problem is that some people would hear their reasoning behind why they don't want the public to see this footage and say, oh yeah, maybe they have a point. But it's like what you said, anyone can tell you what the weaknesses were based on the information that we already know, the things that we've already seen, right? And then the officer who was in charge, he came out days after, like way after the actual shooting happened. And he said, yeah, I did everything that I should have done. And I'm proud of the response and all that. And he didn't say anything out of respect for the families, which was just more of an insult than anything he could have otherwise said. And I mean, that guy, I think it was the next day or 2 days after the shooting, he swore in as a member of the city council. And to be fair, he was elected prior to the shooting, but the decent thing would have been to step down, because if you are given so much responsibility and you do not wield it correctly, you don't get to have more. You shouldn't be allowed to have more responsibility.
That is so reasonable, but going along with that would hamper his political ambitions. So he's not going to do that. But no, you're totally right. And look, some people in the chat, I understand, are saying that all of this footage should be made instantly available in every case. And I understand the concern. There are actual concerns though about, when cops talk to people who've been sexually assaulted and everything, do you want that body cam footage being publicly available, literally anyone else? I'm assuming the victims in most cases do not. So you can't have just everything be like dumped in a Dropbox as soon as it's recorded. But that said, look, who's buying their argument about trying to make it so that shooters can't determine how they detect and investigate things? We know how they do it. They set up the tape and then they stand there for an hour, okay? We understand their tactics. They're just trying to cover their asses. And this is the case where somebody needs to be empowered to step in and make sure that that footage is made available. Now, with that said, though, we know what the right wanted coming out of this shooting was more guns in schools. And it turns out, in some cases, that's what we're gonna be getting. So let's jump into that video now.
House Bill 99, as you know, also addresses the option, and it is an option, of arming school staff. Although this bill was in development well before the recent tragedy in Texas, that heartbreaking school shooting certainly increased the urgency to enact it.
So yes, there's just gonna be more guns in Ohio schools. Now, there had been in some cases, what the law that we're gonna be discussing isn't fundamentally change the possibility that there could be guns in schools, but it makes it far more likely that the people who will be wielding them won't know what they're doing, won't be trained to deal with some sort of school shooter or something, which I can't conceive of how most teachers would be able to be trained for that, but won't even necessarily have the base level training that anyone should have that's gonna be carrying a gun around to stop them from simply leaving it somewhere or accidentally discharging it. So let's break down what this law actually does. It's a permitless gun carry law for qualifying adults that went into effect just yesterday, a measure that would lift restrictions on school teachers, custodians, and bus drivers as well from carrying firearms at work. In Ohio, school employees have been allowed to carry guns on school grounds for years as long as the local school board consents. The Ohio Supreme Court ruled last year that they should receive the same 700 hours of training as law enforcement officials or security officers. Now, I might think that even after all that training, it's still a terrible idea, but 700 hours of training for anything is a lot. This new law, though, cuts that 700 hours down just slightly. It's now 24 hours of training for teachers who wish to carry weapons, so slightly less. And I'm going to guess that after you pass the 24-hour mark, the next 760 odd or 660 odd hours of training, there's probably a few nuggets in there that we would hope that people would have, particularly when they're gonna have guns around kids. But no, we're now, as a country, at least as a state, entering into a grand experiment where there's gonna be more guns in schools. And yes, we're gonna get to see what happens when you give people minimal training and incentivize them to carry guns around kids. Let's hope that there's no accidents.
You know, when I saw that headline for the first time, I think it was yesterday, the feeling that I got was I need to leave this country. You know, if I'm going to ever have kids in this country, I need to leave. I can't be here and raise children. And the thing is, a lot of women my age, a lot of people my age are concerned about a lot of those same things. You know, I have mothers who are friends of mine, and they cry every day when they send their kids off to school because it's so hopeless, right? Nothing is going to happen. And more guns, we know, is not the answer to this problem, right? And then 24 hours is so insulting. You can't learn anything in 24 hours, let alone how to defend a classroom full of children against an armed, person with an assault rifle trying to kill all of the children in the classroom. It doesn't make any sense. It's insulting. It's not going to make any difference. And who has the budget for any of this? Who is paying for all this stuff? And why can't we get more money into actual education instead of wasting it on things like guns and training for teachers?
Yeah,
I don't know. It's very
frustrating.
I agree.
Well, and as we're going to get to in just a sec, you're going to find out that teachers don't actually generally support this. And that's, I guess, one of the mitigating factors that they can legislate this. I don't think there's a ton of teachers that actually want to do this because they don't think that's the solution. But even just one or two, that is one or two additional opportunities every single day for something to happen. For like I get that this is supposed to be like, this is heretical. Responsible gun owners make mistakes. Responsible gun owners sometimes leave their guns unsecured or put them down or accidentally discharge them. All sorts of that just happens. We had the story, it was a week ago, of the principal who, I think it might have been a vice principal, brought a box of guns accidentally from her car into her office and just left them unsecured. They were just in a box there. That happens. I'm sure if you had asked that vice principal before this, they would have said that they were well trained. They all do. Nobody thinks that they are an untrained, irresponsible gun owner. Nobody says that. But it does happen, and the consequences can be absolutely dire. Let me give you just a few more details about the legislation. It no longer makes it a requirement for Ohioans age 21 and older to complete 8 hours of the handgun training course to carry and conceal a firearm, so yet more training being eliminated. It eliminates the requirement for gun carriers to tell police officers they have a concealed weapon on them, though they must say if they're asked. That's just one of those petty things that, like, it's almost like the Republicans want to let you know that they don't actually care about saving cops' lives like they think they do. They think that more guns cops don't know you have is a good thing. It's just like when everything is allowed, when you've just let people do whatever they want with guns, you have to work overtime to come up with new things to give them because they already can have these weapons of war. They already now don't need to be trained on it. So I guess you don't have to tell cops. I don't even know what you go to next. But I alluded to the poll about teachers. So let's jump to that. Recent proposal has called for certain teachers and staff to receive special training to carry guns in school buildings. Please rate your view of this proposal. This is a 2018 Gallup poll. So 20% either strongly favor or somewhat favor this. 63% strongly oppose. So massively, overwhelmingly, teachers are against this. They don't want more guns in their classroom. They certainly don't want the responsibility for taking down a mass shooter. Putting it on them is a massive dereliction of duty for the cops, but also for our elected officials, for our society. And you just hate to see it actually succeeding in Ohio. Any quick final thoughts? We got like 30 seconds.
I don't know a single teacher, no friend of mine who has ever gone into education has done so and considered the fact that they would have to defend their students against a shooter as part of just,
100%.
Part of the job, just part of being a teacher. That's what you have to do now. It's not the same thing. We need teachers to actually teach in this country. That's what we need them to do. We need them to focus there. That's it.
I agree. Well, thank you everyone on the linear platforms or on the podcast. For those of you who are sticking around for the full show though, we're gonna take a quick couple minute break and then we've got some massive stuff to get into. Octo Squiddy says, John, your problem is holding on to logic and consistency as a valued principle. No, I get it. I know that you're right. What I don't get is why this doesn't turn off more people. Like I get that she doesn't care about it. She has other goals. Logic and consistency are not her goals. And I get that the base shares the desire for power and a feeling of supremacy and everything. But like, why doesn't it Why come up with better? Why does the propaganda not need to be good in any way? Why does it never need to be clever? Why do the narratives never need to make sense? It is so easy on their side to do their job because the bar is sunk, deep within the earth's crust. They can just walk over it. Olmo says in a super chat, stop calling retrogrades conservatives. Conservative means preserving. What is that mob preserving? White rule. That would be my answer to you. White dominance. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.